Just because you're in prison doesn't mean you can't get pregnant. With that in mind, here's our list of the top 10 shocking cases of inmates getting pregnant by prison guards and vice versa. So starting off our list at number 10 is Gemma Sophia Dacus. Believe it or not, as of 2016, it wasn't illegal for prison guards to have intercourse with inmates in Western Australia. While such sexual relationships will sometimes cause scandals when they're exposed, the guard involved will only be forced to resign. If the guard refuses, the Corrective Services Commissioner could dismiss them, citing a loss of confidence. But a relationship with a guard and an inmate caused a scandal in 2016 when a male corrections officer at Bandiup Women's Prison in South Swan got a prisoner pregnant. While the corrections officer was unnamed, the inmate was identified as Gemma Sophia Dacus, who was serving a 4-year jail term for drug-related offenses. Meanwhile, other prison guards at the facility joked about the incident, calling it the Immaculate Conception. Since then, the scandal led to increased calls for outlawing guard-inmate intercourse and romantic relationships. Number 9. Tavon White and 4 guards. In 2014, authorities at Baltimore City Detention Center busted a drug and weapon running business operated by several members of the Black Guerra family who were incarcerated at the prison. The gang was led by Tavon White, who was also discovered to have gotten 4 prison guards pregnant. Several prison guards, including the 4 women, were involved with the group and often helped them smuggle contraband into the facility. Now, the trade is very lucrative in prison, where $10 worth of product goes for $50. One of the female guards, Chania Brooks, did it for the money. 2 others, Ketera Stevenson and Jennifer Owens, did it for love. Jennifer even tattooed Tavon's name on her neck and was the only one who got pregnant with twins. Chiana and Ketera were both supplied with white Mercedes-Benzes from Travon. The last guard, Tiffany Linder, once warned him of a planned prison search. He would later claim that she knew about the search because she was cheating on him with a male guard. The 4 women stood trial for their involvement in the gang, and Tavon himself testified against other gang members in exchange for reduced jail time. Now, that situation is so messy, I can't even begin to tell you, but it sure does sound entertaining. If that was a reality show, I think I'd watch the hell out of that. Number 8. Kelly Ann McDade. Kelly Ann McDade got pregnant by Nelson Delgado, an inmate at H.M. Aylesbury Young Offenders Institution, Buckinghamshire, where she worked as a prison guard. Kelly Ann got pregnant soon after they started having intercourse in 2008. She never told colleagues he was the father. Instead, she claimed to have been impregnated during a foreign rendezvous. However, she was forced to resign after CCTV footage showed her opening Nelson's cell when she was not supposed to. Prison authorities did not know her real intentions, and they would have never found out if Kelly Ann hadn't sold the story to a magazine. After this, she was promptly arrested, and girlie, you pretty much snitched on yourself. How stupid. It was later revealed that she tried smuggling 3 phones into prison in March 2009, and she received a 30-month sentence, 18 months for smuggling, and 12 months for misconduct in public office. Now, she and Nelson weren't just a quick fling, as the two had been planning to get married after Nelson left prison. Kelly Ann hoped to build a life with Nelson, although after his release from prison, the couple's relationship failed, and then Nelson went back to prison afterwards for other crimes he committed. Number 7. Tyshenia Love Brewster. Tyshenia Love Brewster used to be a prison guard at Downstate Correctional Facility in Fishkill, New York, where she had worked for 7.5 years. While working there, she got pregnant by an unnamed inmate. While the incident was only revealed in February 2013, police suspect that they have been involved since 2010. Due to this, she was arrested and was 6 months pregnant at the time of the arrest. Now, besides getting pregnant, she was also charged with taking advantage of someone and misconduct. The inmate was then moved to another prison following all of this. Number 6. Jessica Fowler. Sometime in 2017, it was revealed that an inmate at Tennessee Moores County Jail was pregnant from having relations with a prison guard. The guard was Caleb Shane Hopkins, and the inmate was Jessica Fowler. Jessica had been placed on probation for taking advantage of someone back in February 2016, but was later sent to jail in September after violating her probation. Jessica then realized she was pregnant in May 2017 and filed a $5 million lawsuit against Caleb, claiming he took advantage of her. She said Caleb used used to meet her in the prison library at night and bought her silence with cigarettes and prescription drugs. He supposedly wanted her to keep quiet and told her that no one would believe her anyway. Jessica's attorney Ben Rabin said that she was a lesbian, therefore she wasn't attracted to him and didn't voluntarily do the acts. One time when they were intimate, she asked him to use a condom and he replied, "Married men don't buy condoms." She confessed that they had sex 4 times before she got pregnant and was transferred to another prison. Now because of this, she lost the jail credits she'd earned at Moore County Jail, which could have seen her leave prison early. In fact, she had been billed for an early release before she was transferred. She then had the baby at the new prison and Caleb was later arrested. Number 5. Alicia R. Smith. Alicia R. Smith worked as a corrections officer at Pendleton Correctional Facility in Indiana when she got pregnant by an inmate. The prisoner, Dontel Keys, had been incarcerated since 1998, serving a 20-year sentence for reckless homicide, criminal confinement, and kidnapping. Prison authorities remained oblivious to the relationship between the two, even though Alicia was still working at the facility at the time she gave birth on June 15, 2016. 4 months later, in October 2016, she left the prison for Marion County Community Corrections. However, she and Dontel remained in contact until April 2017. Number 4. Tara Avery. In January 2018, it was reported that an unnamed inmate at the Hamilton Correctional Institution in Florida had gotten a prison guard pregnant. The guard, Tara Avery, was charged with sexual misconduct and taking contraband into the prison. Tara confessed to being intimate with the inmate in a bathroom, and authorities only found out about the illicit relationship in November 2017 when other inmates tipped them off that Tara was pregnant by a prisoner. Prison officials searched the inmate's cell and found letters from Tara. He had also written her phone number in an address book, and prison officials also went through the inmate's call records and discovered he had told his sister about the pregnancy. Now, to remove all doubts that it was another guard he got pregnant, he had mentioned Tara's name. Now, besides having sex with an inmate, Tara also confessed to receiving $200 from the prisoner's sister, and she also gave his sister $100 to pay his phone bills. Number 3. Jean Brown. While working at Kirkland Correctional Institution in Richland County, Jean Brown had an intimate relationship with an inmate inside the prison. Now, the arrest warrant said the 29-year-old Colombian woman got pregnant after engaging in a sexual relationship with an inmate over several months. The South Carolina Department of Corrections Police Services discovered Jean's pregnancy based on information recovered from her cell phone and Facebook account. Due to this, she was charged with first-degree sexual misconduct with an inmate and misconduct in office. The correctional officer is now behind bars at the Alvin S. Glenn Detention Center, jail records show. Number 2. Nancy Gonzalez. In 2014, prison guard Nancy Gonzalez received a 366-day sentence for being involved with an inmate at the Lower Manhattan prison where she worked, and she'd become pregnant as a result. The prisoner was Ronald Wilson, who was on death row for ending the lives of 2 police detectives. Now, besides engaging in physical activity with Rondell, Nancy was also found guilty of leaving other prisoners unguarded during the times they were intimate and allowed Rondell to beat up another inmate. The relationship also put her in a vulnerable position where he could have stolen her cell keys. Nancy said she agreed to have the baby for Rondell, thinking it would make the jury reconsider slamming him with a second death sentence during his retrial, but that did not help, and he again received the death penalty in 2013. He received his first death sentence during his initial trial in 2003, and after Nancy gave birth to the baby in 2013, Robert Capafari Jr., another prisoner she was involved with after leaving Rondell, offered to take care of the child. Robert used to be held at the prison where Nancy worked until he was transferred to another facility after federal agents suspected he and Nancy were in a relationship. However, the pair remained in contact with their cell phones, which had been tapped. This allowed for federal agents to confirm her relationship with Robert. They also discovered her earlier relationship with Rondell after they heard her tell Robert she would not continue said relationship. Now, Robert never got to care for the baby because Nancy lost custody of the child soon after he was born, and this whole situation just sounds like something straight out of a soap opera. And coming in at number 1 is Kimberly Hockaday. Floridian Kimberly Hockaday had been in and out of prison before she was sent to Lowell Correctional Institution in March 2013 on theft charges. Now, she was pregnant before arriving at the prison and birthed a son that September. She gave custody to her fiance and continued serving her sentence. Then she was pregnant again by the time she was released in February 2014 and gave birth to a second child 7 months later. Now, the pregnancy caused a scandal because obviously Kimberly had gotten pregnant in prison. She named a prison guard as the father. She claimed he had wooed her with cigarettes a few months after she gave birth to her first child. However, DNA tests showed the guard was not the father. She later claimed that she had been intimate with 3 guards, including the one she suspected of being the father, while in prison. Now, she only named that guard because she thought the baby looked like him. However, Kimberly refused to name the other 2 guards. She was back in prison at the time and feared she could be returned to Lowell. After giving birth, she ended up giving the second baby up for adoption. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 shocking cases of inmates getting pregnant by prison guards. Which one shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you next time. Sometimes female prisoners go into jail when they're pregnant, whether they know it or not. With that in mind, here's our list of the top 10 shocking cases of inmates giving birth in prison. Number 10. Louise Powell. Louise Powell was in prison for the first time after being sentenced to 8 months in March 2020. She gave birth to a stillborn in a shocking circumstances in a prison toilet without specialist medical assistance or pain relief. A prison nurse received 3 emergency calls from a prison officer and never came to the woman's aid when she developed agonizing stomach cramps. An investigation found that the prison supervising officer made 3 calls to the duty nurse, raising concerns about Louise during a period of 2 hours. The nurse did not come and see her, made inadequate reference to her medical file, and concluded incorrectly that she was bleeding and suffering severe stomach pains as a result of a painful period. Louise was unaware that she was pregnant at the time, and after the whole ordeal, she said, "It's not safe to have pregnant women in prison. We are just treated like a number. I decided to go public in the hope that things will change and pregnant women will stop being imprisoned." Number 9. Jasmine Valentine. Jasmine Valentine said she was left giving birth to her baby alone on the dirty concrete floor in her jail cell in Maryland and filed a federal lawsuit alleging that jail nurses ignored her screams and pleas for help for 6 hours. Jasmine alleges some nurses working for the jail's contracted medical provider, Pennsylvania-based Prime Care Medical Incorporated, said she was withdrawing from drugs, not in labor, and some jail staffers and medical staff laughed at her, saying she was just trying to get out of her cell late at night. Now, she was indeed giving birth, and she removed what she believed was her baby's atomic sac and slid it under her cell door to prove she was about to have a baby. The nurses also ignored a concern raised by the jail deputy about Jasmine, but he did not contact any superiors. He discovered her holding the baby girl in her cell about 15 minutes after she was born, just after midnight, and an ambulance was called to take them to the hospital. Now, because of the unsanitary conditions in the cell, the baby developed a type of staph bacteria infection that is resistant to many antibiotics. Jasmine, who had never given birth before, said she feared that her baby would die and she might bleed out while delivering her. But realizing that no one was going to help, she said she was determined to try to deliver the baby on her own, and all I gotta say is, what a strong woman. Number 8. Crystalline Allen Tate. Pulaski County Deputy Nowaski Connors was checking cells on the 2nd floor of the jail's D unit just before 11:45 a.m. on November 11th when she spotted Crystalline Allen Tate sitting up in her bunk with her back to the cell door and something hanging from under the covers. The hanging object turned out to be an umbilical cord, the report says, and Connor saw that she was holding a baby she had delivered alone. A medical emergency was called in the jail, and additional deputies, jail medical staff, and ambulance personnel responded. The incident report said, which contained statements from other personnel involved, which says that Crystalline and her baby were taken to UAMS Medical Center for treatment, with the child placed in the neonatal intensive care unit, the report says. While at the hospital, she told deputies she did not know she was pregnant, that the delivery did not hurt much, and that she didn't want to tell jail staff about the baby because she was afraid they would take it, according to the report. Wow, just Wow. Number 7. Haley Ryder. Haley Ryder didn't know she was pregnant when she arrived at Lee Arundel State Prison in January of 2021. She had been sentenced to 2 years in prison and 8 years of probation for a non-violent drug offense. Prison staff discovered her pregnancy during a routine medical exam. Now, Haley wasn't given any information about her pregnancy, not even her due date. In prison, she had a metal twin-size bed, sleeping mat approximately 3.5 inches thick, a fitted sheet, and a blanket. It wasn't any type of pregnancy diet that I would wish on anyone, she said. One morning she woke up and her contractions were 2 minutes and 30 seconds apart. She told a guard and said, "I got in the back of a prison van in my prison clothes and was taken to Atlanta Medical Center. She gave birth there and said there was an armed guard at the very end of my bed with a 360 view of everything you don't want anyone to see. But my baby was healthy." Haley was not allowed to call friends, family, or even the father of her child to say that she was in labor. She was alone besides the armed officer, she recalls. "I've never seen her in my life, but she saw the birth of my baby." Now, this is incredibly sad, but at least she got the proper medical treatment. Number 6. Anna Harley. Anna Harley was 6 months pregnant with her first child as she stood in court for the first time in her life and heard the words "remanded into custody." This meant that she'd be held in prison for 6 months as she waited for a trial date and would give birth in prison. Anna said, "I spent the final 3 months of my pregnancy in an environment unsafe for any woman, let alone a pregnant woman. I barely ate because the junk food made me sick, and I missed several midwife appointments due to staff shortages. I had to take vitamin D supplements because I was too scared to leave my cell and go outside in the yard for sunlight and air in case a fight broke out and anything happened to my baby." Now, her contractions started and she pressed the cell buzzer to call for urgent help. She was told that someone was coming, but no one came for 2 hours. Then she was told that a nurse would come and assess whether she was in labor. She had to wait for another 2 hours for the nurse to arrive and confirm she was in labor, which is just unacceptable. Anna said, "My baby was on the way and nobody saw it as urgent. An ambulance was called and I was patted down and then handcuffed to an officer before finally being driven to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, I was begging for my mom and my son's father to be called, but guards ignored me. In the hospital, I was screaming in agony, giving birth for the first time, as 2 prison guards sat in the tiny hospital bay and watched. Eventually, a doctor who was disgusted by the guards' behavior called my mom, and thankfully she made it in time." Number 5. Rebecca Figuera. Rebecca Figuera said in 2006, "I was 2 months pregnant when I got arrested. At first, I didn't worry about being pregnant with my 3rd child in jail because I knew I wasn't guilty of a crime, but the state had other ideas about my guilt." She continued, "This pregnancy at age 23 was high risk because of a mix of health concerns, and both times I had given birth, my water didn't break. I needed medical assistance in order to dilate enough to deliver my babies. Then one day while in prison, she had bad contractions and went to a hospital, and the nurses and an ER doctor who evaluated her told her that she was having Braxton Hicks contractions. She then went back to the jail, and a week later she went into labor for real. She had to wait alone in a transfer cell for an ambulance and deputies to arrive. She said, "I was in so much pain, I was screaming and crying. By the time I got to the hospital, I was bleeding." There was a silver lining though, as she said, because the female corrections officer who brought me food had called my grandma and told me to meet at the hospital. My grandma was in the waiting room. I just wanted somebody there that I loved, but she wasn't allowed in the room while I was giving birth. Even worse, the deputies handcuffed one of my wrists to the bed and then shackled one of my feet. Finally, when the doctor told them to remove the restraints, they let the handcuff go, but they kept the leg shackle. Number 4. Miss A. A report for a teenage inmate named Miss A highlights the vulnerability of the 18-year-old who was in prison for the first time and was remanded for a robbery charge. She was said to have had a troubled and traumatic childhood and was sad, angry, and scared after being told her baby would be taken away from her at birth. Unfortunately, the baby didn't make it due to numerous failings of the system. There was confusion among different health professionals about her due date. She told a prison nurse that she would end her own life or somebody else's if the baby was taken away from her, but this information was not adequately shared. She was put on extended observation, meaning she should have been regularly checked, but this did not happen. It was left to 2 prisoners to alert staff to the fact that there was blood in her cell. A statement said Miss A gave birth alone in her cell overnight without medical assistance. This should have never happened. Overall, the healthcare offered to Miss A in Bronzeville was not equivalent to that she could have expected in the community. Number 3. Amy. An anonymous inmate simply called Amy wrote about her story. She said, "I just spent 5 days in an overcrowded booking area of the Harris County Jail. No bed, showers, or clean clothes, no hot meal, no medications. 5 days in booking before being sent to a dirty quarantine cell. I had gone to medical with contractions 2 days in a row, in agony, helped by another female inmate, only to be turned away both times, saying I was faking it or just dehydrated. They never checked for dilation or anything. You're faking it, stop screaming," a guard told me. Sir, I'm begging you, please help me. No one is helping me. Just please call 911, that's all I'm asking. Please. Finally, my water broke and doctors and nurses rushed over. Finally, they're gonna help me and call 911, I thought. I was wrong. Instead, they took my pants off and asked me why I peed on myself and why I was faking again. I was crying, asking them to please call an ambulance. I knew I was too far into labor to stop it. I also knew it was too early to have my baby. I begged, please call an ambulance. Guards kept cussing at me while male inmates stood around and watched me in my state of undress and distress. Tears steamed down my face as I felt the sharp contractions. "Stop pushing," the nurse kept screaming at me, but I couldn't stop. The baby was coming. I could feel his head as I checked for dilation myself and gave birth to my baby boy with no help. Now this is just horrible, and no one should ever be treated like that ever. Number 2. Julie Belota. Julie Belota was in jail for breach of reconnaissance and gave birth without a doctor present while in a segregation cell at the Ottawa Carleton Detention Center. She was in pain for about 9 hours before giving birth to her son, Gioni Lee, through a breached birth. Now, a breached birth occurs when the baby enters the birth canal with the buttocks or feet first instead of the head first. Julie claims guards ignored her calls for help and became irritated by her cries, transferring her from a shared cell to a segregation cell. This is where she gave birth 4 hours after the transfer. Julie also said she underwent 2 tests from nurses in the jail who believed she was in false labor. An ambulance should have been called. She should have been taken for an examination at the hospital. The hospital should have made the determination whether it was real labor or not, she says, and I have to agree. Those nurses are not trained properly to deal with that type of pregnancy. And coming in at number 1 is Tammy Jackson. The ordeal of Tammy Jackson, who gave birth in an isolation cell in Florida jail, has prompted an internal investigation and has set off a wave of outrage after her lawyer said her repeated cries for help were ignored. Tammy woke up with painful contractions around 3 a.m. and started to bang on the door of her Broward County jail cell, screaming for help, said her lawyer representing her. She ended up spending 7 hours without medication or seeing a doctor. She gave birth by herself and was forced to crouch down and just catch the baby. Her lawyer said that is offensive to humanity for her to have to do that. Broward County Sheriff's Office said that after the delivery, a doctor and 2 nurses attended to the mother and her baby girl. Guards in the jail did not notice that Tammy had given birth until they found her in her cell holding the baby 7 hours after she said she needed help. Again, this treatment is horrible. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 shocking cases of inmates giving birth in prison. Which one shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and we'll see you next time.